Welcome to the Human Capital Innovations Podcast, your go-to source for personal, professional, and organizational growth and development. We hope you tune in often for all things people management, organizational development and change, organizational leadership, and social impact related. Maximize your personal and organizational potential with Human Capital Innovations Podcast. Welcome to the Human Capital Innovations Podcast. In this HCI podcast episode, I talk with Kate Steen about improving employee retention by showing concern for employee safety and well-being. Kate Steen, welcome to the Human Capital Innovations Podcast.
Thank you so much, John. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk with you today. We're going to be focusing on a topic that has a lot of relevance in a time of COVID, a time of emergencies and crisis. We're going to be focusing on improving employee retention and other employee outcomes by showing concern for employees' safety and well-being. We need to make sure that we're providing adequate training so that employees know how to respond to emergencies. We need to know how to help them create safer workspaces. And of course, that applies to situations like COVID, where we have health challenges, but it also has to do with workplace safety issues and crises that can emerge. So those are the things we'll be exploring together today. As we get started, I wanted to share Kate's bio with everybody. Kate Steen is founder of Make It Happen Preparedness Services, which helps leaders of mid-market businesses and organizations build resilience through customized emergency preparedness training and planning. Disasters have victims, emergencies have responders. She helps you turn your team into awesome responders. She and her team are working to create a future where businesses and organizations that are prepared to survive emergencies and thrive after them are the foundation for resilient communities throughout California. Thanks again for joining me, Kate. Anything else you would like to add by way of personal background or context for listeners?
Yeah. Well, I knew that you and I needed to talk when I read your book and saw your emphasis on company culture, people-centric organizations, and growth culture, because that really speaks to the way we approach both emergency preparedness and workplace safety. So I'm really looking forward to this conversation.
Yeah, and let's start there. Let's start with safety culture. There's lots of specific things we can do in terms of policies, practices, procedures, making sure people are trained, signage, like all of those types of safety protocols. There's lots we can talk about on what to do there. But I really do believe that it all starts with creating the safety mindset, the safety culture amongst your people, and a resilience culture. And an adaptiveness, a preparation, and a response culture, right? And unless people are thinking that way, what you end up doing is you continue to have accidents, you continue to have health issues and injuries, and you're only being reactive rather than proactive and trying to stop them from happening in the first place. And of course, we don't want people getting hurt. We don't want people getting sick. We certainly don't want people, dying on the job. We want to make sure that our workplace is a physically safe workplace, a psychologically safe workplace, and that requires, a lot of the types of work that your organization does.
Right. Every business has a company culture, intentional or not. If senior management does nothing to create a company culture, that doesn't mean there isn't one. It just means that they've forfeited to others the power to shape that culture. The culture is how employees are behaving and talking about the business in the absence of any unifying standards or messaging. Businesses that understand that they have a company culture and want to harness the power of that culture to drive their success are the ones that are best positioned to reap the benefits of a safe workplace. I'm curious, John, have you seen businesses that were sort of unaware that they had a company culture, and so we're letting others create it?
I think that happens a lot actually. In fact, I was reading an article on LinkedIn. This was probably a couple years ago, but and I can't remember who wrote it, but it was someone trying to be provocative, to get clicks and get reads. And so I'm not sure if they actually really truly believe this, but they talked about the whole article is about how organizational culture is a myth. And then they go into why we're just chasing our tails if we try to focus on culture. And the whole time I'm thinking, as I'm reading this, I'm thinking that is so stupid. Anytime you get two or more people together in a group, a culture will emerge, and it's just a matter of, like you said, whether it's something that just organically arises, which usually has unhealthy elements to it, or is it something that we are very purposeful about and strategic about to shape the type of culture that we want. I think that's just like a social fact that culture exists when you have people together. And so I do believe that there are people who legitimately, they really think that either culture isn't a big deal, perhaps it doesn't even exist, but certainly it's not something we should focus our energy on. And typically, those are the organizations that have the most unhealthy cultures, where there's lots of exploitation, lots of abuses, kind of a dog eat dog, hyper competitive kind of environment, and that's a culture. It's just not a particularly healthy one, and so I think we really do need to make sure that leaders are recognizing the role they play in shaping a good, healthy culture for their people to drive things like attracting and retaining the very best people, getting the high level of performance and innovation out of your people. All of those things don't happen in and of themselves. They have to happen. You have to cultivate an environment where people can perform, and we can't outsource that. We can't just say, "Oh, go read this good book and then you're done." Like, you have to be purposeful. You have to be consistent. You have to be committed, and maintain it. Because even if you put some effort into it up front, it won't just magically continue unless you continue to support it.
Exactly. Yeah. In my mind, there's three levels of workplace safety. The first is compliance, which is ensuring that your company has in place all the plans, training, reporting systems that are required by the law. That's the minimum. That's enough to ensure that you won't get fined by OSHA or another regulatory agency. The next level is cost savings. This is where you take steps that are going to have a real impact on your workers' comp experience modification and your general liability insurance premiums. And this includes things like, doing a workplace safety assessment, doing a safer spaces plan, which is something we've created for organizations that are in earthquake country, how to develop an eye and do some prevention around the things that are going to tip over or go flying in an earthquake. Doing ergonomic assessments, and developing a fleet safety program. If you've got more than two vehicles, you've got a fleet, and you need to have some policies in place there. And then there's the third level, which is aiming for safety competence, at getting good at safety, so that it becomes something that the company is known for. Safety and emergency preparedness are not just priorities for the organization, because priorities can change from year to year. They're values. And at this level, you do things like, investing in high quality behavioral safety training, doing monthly preparedness drills and exercises, having accountability systems, and really creating that safety culture. It's a bit like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. At the compliance level, you're meeting your employees' safety needs. Then as you move through the higher levels, employees are getting a sense of belonging and connection as they watch out for each other's safety. And then as they see their employer taking positive steps to keep them safe, it develops a sense of respect, self-esteem, status, recognition. And then when safety becomes a core organizational value, employees are motivated to become outstanding at safety. And that's where you're getting into a really great company culture, and that's where you start seeing the benefits like employee retention. Most organizations these days are having a horrendous time bringing back staff, finding people to work with them, and there's a real high priority on hanging on to the ones that you have. And there's a lot of sort of independent accountability around this, between the website Glassdoor, where people can review you as an employer, or
Yeah.
on the more positive side, the best places to work list. The companies that invest in safety, it's going to show in their organizational reputation, and that's going to impact their ability to recruit. And if employees feel that their employer really cares about them, if they've worked anywhere else, they know that's a fairly rare thing. So that is going to encourage them to stay with that employer who's investing in them.
Yeah, yeah, and I love kind of the tiered approach that you just described in terms of workplace safety, employee well-being. All of those tiers, all those elements are important. But ultimately, for me, if I'm trying to choose which organization I want to go work for, or whether I want to stay where I'm at, or look to go somewhere else, um, culture, the environment, the people I work with, that's one of the top things. Now, I need to be paid fairly and equitably, and if someone's lowballing me, I'm not going to want to go work there. But all else being equal, with relatively similar pay and benefits packages, I'm going to be focusing on what kind of a culture exists. Is it a psychologically safe place? Is it a physically safe place? Does the employer invest in their people? Do they actually genuinely care about their people, not just say the right things in meetings and put nice words on the wall, but do they actually live it through their practices, and how they interact with people consistently over time? These are the types of things that I'm going to be focusing on and hoping to find in an organization that I'm going to devote a good portion of my life to. And to your point, it's really challenging right now to find and retain good people. Before the pandemic, it was very challenging, particularly in STEM fields, in certain sectors. I mean, there just aren't enough people to fill the jobs, let alone getting like the best people, the top-notch people. And that changed a little bit during the pandemic because unemployment rates went up. Many organizations laid off a lot of people. But that's already reversed itself. It's already the case that organizations are having a really hard time filling, staffing their organizations and filling their roles with great quality people. And so we can't take it for granted. We have to treat people with dignity and respect. We have to treat them well. We have to genuinely care for them and value them and invest in them. And it really is kind of a low bar to say we need to make sure that we're creating a physically safe workplace environment. I was doing work with a big national, well, really a big international corporation, but very huge in the U.S. They have a factory near where I live, so I was doing some work with the factory, and they have not a great safety record, and they were a little bit befuddled by it. They put in place a bunch of policies and practices and self checks and kind of all the typical things you would expect to see on a factory floor, OSHA compliance and everything. And yet the problems kept persisting. Like they kept on having accidents, and not minor accidents, like really bad accidents. And of course, that's a really horrible thing for an organization because there's all the expense, involved, litigation, all that kind of stuff that's involved when accidents occur, higher rates for coverage, and all that sort of stuff that impacts the bottom line. But on the human side, you have people getting hurt, and you have a really hard time. Nobody. We don't live like in the early days of the Industrial Revolution where people just feel like that's the way it has to be. Like people expect to be safe, and so then they're seeing people leaving, and they're having a hard time keeping good people, and it becomes a spiral, and they're wondering why is this happening? Because they were saying the right things, they had policies in place, but when you when you zoomed in a little bit, what I saw is that they were undermining themselves, in how they were approaching, and the type of culture that they were establishing. They did not have a safety culture. They had a do whatever it takes at all costs, cut corners culture. And
Mhm.
that is not particularly compatible with workplace safety in a environment like a factory, right? You really have to take it very seriously, and you have to expect and demand compliance. You have to expect and demand accountability from the senior leadership all the way down to line workers, right, on the factory floor. And they weren't doing that, and so of course it ended up having really negative impacts for them. Thankfully, over time, they had some leadership changes. They were able to see, um, the problems. They were better able to understand how maybe being faster and more quote unquote efficient wasn't actually helpful if they have to throw out batches of product due to problems that occurred, and they have higher premiums, and they have fines and settlements and all that kind of stuff. They started to realize that, and they were able to right the ship. But it shouldn't take many injuries to get to that point.
Exactly.
I'm excited to announce the publication of my new book from HCI Press, The Alchemy of Truly Remarkable Leadership: Ordinary, Everyday Actions That Produce Extraordinary Results. Consider how the nature of work has shifted over the past 50 years. With increased globalization, rapid technological advancement, and the shift in economic composition, the average job of today looks very different than the average job of 50 years ago. What will the jobs and organizations of tomorrow look like? Moreover, what does this all mean for organizational leaders? What are the core competencies and capabilities of organizations and their leadership that are prepared for continued disruption and geopolitical and socioeconomic shifts? Regardless of what the future holds, increasingly, leaders need to be socially minded, data-driven, decisive, champions of talent, and disruptors of the traditional notions of leadership, teams, organizations, and work. The Alchemy of Truly Remarkable Leadership will help you to explore your own leadership competencies and capabilities and consider ways to apply and implement them into your workplace and personal life.
Exactly. How motivated the day after someone's been seriously hurt, how motivated are all the other employees going to be to really give their all? You can get, in terms of productivity, you can get so much more out of employees who are motivated because they feel like their employer has their back than you will out of unmotivated employees who don't feel safe, who are just under pressure to move faster. And you listed all of the costs that come with not paying attention to safety. The possibility of being fined by OSHA. On the one hand, the chances of you're getting just a random general inspection from OSHA are, I actually figured this out, it's seriously lower than your chances of getting struck by lightning. However, 65% of OSHA inspections come from employee complaints. So if you've got discontent employees or people who are observing lack of safety that's not being addressed, you're much more likely to get a visit from OSHA and get dinged for every single plan you don't have in place, and possibly more serious for violations.
And it piles up really fast, right?
Oh yeah.
Once they do show up, you better have your ducks in a row. So, and yeah, when those accidents happen, or when people self-report or file a complaint, that's the trigger that will unleash the regulatory agencies, and it can. I mean, that alone can be disruptive to business processes and everything. Not to mention all the fines and everything. So, I mean, it's just so much better to just be proactive, do what you're supposed to do, treat your people well, take care of them, make sure they're safe, and then you don't have to worry about any of that stuff.
Oh yeah, I used to be an attorney and I've been an employer. And if you want something to kill productivity, try a lawsuit.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've already kind of referred to several of the different pieces that can contribute or hinder the ability to attract and retain really great people. I'm wondering what else you think in terms of what like are some proactive steps that an organization could take. If anyone's listening and they're thinking, ooh, we probably aren't doing as much as we need to or should be doing in relation to employee safety and well-being, what are some of the first steps that they should be taking in order to right the ship, get their workplace, get those plans in place, get the trainings in place? What are those first steps that they should be doing that you would recommend to any client that you work with?
Well, I am based in California, where we have some very high standards for employer safety that are beyond what OSHA requires. But first of all, just find out what's required. Get those plans in place. It's not difficult. Training is essential, and it's got to be high quality training, or employees are just going to be tuning it out. You have to really invest in whatever you do, doing it at a quality level.
Can I just on that point, because I agree, and I do a lot of work in the training and development space, adult learning and such, and it's so true. I mean, it's hard to capture people's attention in the first place, but you have a crappy training, whether it's a face-to-face training where people are just zoning out, or even like just recently at my university, we had to every year we have our sexual harassment Title IX trainings, we have our cybersecurity trainings, we have this slew of online trainings that we have to do every year, and that, of course, that's important. We need to do it, and they're decent. They're definitely better than they were even 5 years ago. But they're still not great. And so, what ends up happening is people just end up clicking through as fast as they possibly can while they're doing something else, and they're not really paying attention. And if that's the case, then are they really learning anything? Are they really understanding what they need to do to respond to a situation? Of course not. They're just checking a box for the organization so the organization can say we did training. And that's really about all that's happening if the training's not well done.
Yeah, one of my colleagues says that in order to capture an audience for safety training within the first 7 minutes, you have to tell them something they have never heard before. I would say in the first 7 seconds, you need to do that. You need to, early on, capture their attention and say, oh, I could really learn some stuff here. That's what I would say for online training. In-person training, the key there is just have them interacting constantly, getting them up out of their seats, physically doing things that are really going to, you're not just conveying the material, but you're building new neural pathways. And that happens best through physical interaction and sort of, testing and quizzing that has to do with what happens in their particular work site. I am not a fan of any kind of off-the-shelf canned training, because if an employee doesn't feel it's relevant to them, they're going to turn it off. And that's why we customize what we do to every employer, and the scenarios and the trainings are built around their workplace and their company culture and their what exactly the product or service they provide is, and even getting down to using very localized details. So the hazardous waste spill has happened on Highway 101 near the Steel Lane exit. So that's why so this is something that could happen here.
Yeah. Very good, very good. Well, Kate, it has been a real pleasure talking with you. I notice we're getting close to the end of our time together, and I want to be respectful of your time. But before we close, I wanted to give you a chance to share with listeners how they can get connected with you, find out more about your business, and then give us the final word on the topic for today.
Okay. Ways to connect with me would be either through our website, which is Make It Happen PS, as in preparednessservices.com. And I'm always happy to hear from people through LinkedIn. That's the social media that I pretty much exclusively use, and post safety content there all the time. Last word on safety. I think maybe I'd talk a bit about, especially for preparedness, it can bring up a lot of fear when you talk about emergencies and disasters. I say building competence instills confidence. The more you prepare, the more you feel like you have things under control. That fear gives way to confidence. And that's why we emphasize, rather than how scary an emergency would be, what being prepared looks like.
Yeah, I love it. Well, thank you, Kate. It has been a real pleasure. I encourage listeners to reach out, to get connected, find out more about what she and her organization could do for you. And as always, I hope everyone can stay healthy and safe, that you can find meaning and purpose at work each and every day. And I hope you have a great week.
We are excited about the launch of HCI's new magazine, Human Capital Leadership. Human Capital Leadership is a free, interactive e-magazine designed to help individuals, leaders, and organizations find innovative approaches to maximize their human capital potential. We will be publishing issues quarterly in August, November, February, and May. Check out the first issue and let us know what you think. Thanks again for joining us for this episode of the Human Capital Innovations Podcast. I hope you stay healthy and safe and that you have a great week. Check out our new weekly LinkedIn newsletter, Alchemizing Human Capital, exploring industry trends via original research and interviews with executives and thought leaders from across the globe. We look forward to having you join us.